All frecked up, day 44. I decided to make this video for the folks that have struggled on the sugar diet or may later jump onto the sugar diet and then find out that they are fructose intolerant. Because I have fought some battles with fructose. You know, the higher the fructose content, the more it ramps up the liver. And, it should be, in theory, good for us. But because of, in my situation, a long duration on low carb with quite a bit of intermittent fasting, several years back, but a dedication to the low carb, high fat lifestyle. That low carbohydrate intake affected my microbiome. The gut flora adjusted to the diet that I was on for the past 9 years. And so ramping up the sugar, I've had some issues and some challenges, and it seems to be tied directly to fructose. So, for instance, if I have a plain baked potato, well, that's just pure starch, which gets metabolized as straight glucose. I have no issue with that. I have no issue with glucose at all. Now, we could make the argument that when I first got on this diet at the outset, I was very glucose intolerant, meaning I'd have glucose, my body didn't tolerate it well, and I would go night-night, carb coma. But as far as like glucose, any of the starches, corn, rice, potatoes, they didn't cause me any gut issues. They didn't cause me to be bloated or have any stomach or abdominal cramps, nothing like that. So, in essence, the sugar diet is focusing on the absence of fat. The absence of fat, and then further refined, it was, well, maybe we should restrict protein too. So whether you're doing it as like sugar diet version 1.0, which was sugar in the absence of fat, or whether you're on, say, like the 2.0 version where we are restricting protein, or at least we've been instructed to restrict protein because that has its own advantages. Regardless of which version of the sugar diet you're on, if you're doing sugar in the absence of fat, the first and foremost thing is to get the fat out of your diet. The dietary fat needs to be gone. Under 30 grams, I think, per day is being quite generous, and you're going to have better results the lower you can get that dietary fat. But yeah, like if you're doing the sugar diet, the emphasis is on the absence of fat, and then the sugar is what you're going to run on. And if you have issues with fructose, like I have, and still continue to have to a lesser degree, even now, 44 days in, then the most important thing you can do is look for swaps. Things you can swap in place of that fruit smoothie, that bowl of fruit salad, whatever. And honey would be a trigger for me. Agave nectar, agave syrup was terrible, like really severe reaction to that, severe cramping. So like the table sugar, even though the fructose is still in there, I could tolerate that to a degree. It seemed to be mostly linked to portion size. So say a pint of apple juice would be fine. A half a gallon of apple juice would just leave me miserable. So I would encourage you, if you're getting into the sugar diet, to play around with the fruit and see what kind of experience you're having. If you're having a fructose intolerance, then dial back the quantity. And much like the channel I follow, Jason of Wales, he has broken out his portions into multiple meals per day. His was for a reason of potentially having Crohn's, or at least playing with, what could I do to mitigate the issues that he was facing. His own particular issues are detailed on his channel. But if you're like me and you've had issues with fructose, it seems to be dose dependent. So break it out into smaller servings per day. You might still be able to, on the day, have the same intake of fruit, but broken out into smaller meals, smaller portions. You might not end up with the cramping and the bloating and all that. The second thing would be if you still have issues with the smaller portions and that fructose is causing you all the misery of the stomach cramps and bloating, then dial back on the fructose and in place ramp up the starches, ramp up the glucose, the pure glucose sources. So the other thing would be to back off the juices. because at the end of the day, if you've had pints of water in place of all of these pints of juice, and then all the dietary choices, whether you're doing the fruit, whether you're doing the potatoes, if all those are the same, then, ramping up the water intake is not a bad thing. It's certainly not a bad thing. So if you're swapping in pints of water instead of pints of juice or pints of fruit smoothies, you're actually going to be, and I'm reluctant to bring it up because I don't count calories, but calories do come into the conversation because, well, I'll get to that. But if you're swapping in water in place of the fruit juices, you will be reducing your caloric intake from those beverages, from those fruit juices, fruit smoothies. You'll probably make your gut a lot happier if you are fructose intolerant. And, that can change. So don't start telling yourself the story of, oh, I'm just fructose intolerant. I have dietary fructose malabsorption. That can change because the gut microbiome changes. What I'm getting at here is if the fruit juices are causing you a problem, you could do like Durian Rider and make up some sugar water. You could just drink plain water. But make sure you're getting your calories in. And by that, I just mean the proper amount of food. Because if we restrict too much, then we're just doing some version of a starvation diet. We're calorie counting and we're under eating. And that's not going to ramp up the metabolism. The other thing is, with all the considerations on the sugar diet of, make sure you don't go to bed hungry. Make sure that you're getting enough to eat, but also you don't want to have, a big stomach. You want the stomach mostly flat. We're trying to, at least from my perspective, it's like walking a tightrope because you don't want to undereat and be in a caloric restriction type situation, but you don't want to overeat and have, a big round gut and be, completely bloated and full of food. So it's like, don't be hungry, but don't overeat, but don't undereat. And it's like, at that point, I think the calorie counting can become a tool that is somewhat useful because Sugar is Life, another great channel, another great YouTube channel, Zach S. I was listening to a video early this morning of his, and he was talking about the calorie restriction, don't fall victim to that. And I'm like, well, shit, did I undereat yesterday? And so, I calculated the calories from both food and beverage, and it's like, well, no, I had 3,600 calories. It didn't seem like a whole lot of food in my mind when I ran through the list, but looking at the calories, the total intake for the day, it was, just a few calories shy of 3,600. So that is a good tool to be mindful of whether you're eating, as you should, under eating, you don't want to be under eating. There's no reason for that. On the sugar diet, you want to ramp up your metabolism. You want to provide your body the fuel to run on, the energy to run on throughout the day. This video is simply dealing with how do we step back from the fructose if it's causing us problems. So hopefully there was some valuable information there, at least one or two things that you could implement that maybe you hadn't thought of or what have you. But just trying to serve the greater good here. It's no fun when you're cramped up. It's no fun when you're bloated up. And in my experience, that has been directly tied to the fructose intake. So anyway, hope this video finds you well, and I hope you had a great day. See ya.